What's up, everybody? I'm Steven from the Hills Maniacs, and today I'm going to be talking about the spin-off to one of my favorite crime dramas, which is NCIS. The spin-off that I'm going to be referring to in this video is the newest one that just premiered a couple days ago as of this recording, NCIS Origins, which is essentially a prequel to the original NCIS series that is still airing on CBS. I think they're on season 22 or whatever. So this is like a prequel to that. So I'm going to kind of give my thoughts on that after the premiere that happened with the first two episodes, and just kind of maybe sort of review the first two episodes at least in a way, and give my thoughts on the show and if it's going to work as a spin-off and that sort of thing. So grab your gear, everybody, and let's get started. So for those of you that don't know, NCIS Origins is a spin-off that's based on the early career and the sort of early life of Leroy Jethro Gibbs, who was the original, like technically the main character, like from the original cast of the NCIS series. He was the leader of the NCIS group, and eventually retired, and I think it was like season 19 probably at this point. It might have been even earlier than that. I can't remember exactly what season it was, but he ended up leaving the show, I guess, technically, but also the character of Gibbs basically retired, and they had to kind of move on without him and get a new leader for the group and all that kind of stuff, which we're seeing in these later seasons of the series, that's currently on. But this NCIS Origins show is mainly about Gibbs, his early life, like I guess after he was out of the military and everything, and he's back in America. But it also serves as an origin story for the NCIS, like actual, I guess police force, whatever you want to call it, which was originally known as Naval Investigative Service back in that time when Gibbs was first starting out. So it's kind of an origin for that as well, which I guess is why it's called NCIS Origins. So it's an origin story for both the character of Gibbs as well as the origin of NCIS, which I think is actually kind of interesting because we haven't really gotten to see too much of the earlier years of NCIS other than through like flashbacks and that sort of thing. So like having this kind of series is worth it, I think, because it kind of gives us that backstory on the history of NCIS and how it all came to be and what it was like back in the day versus how it is now in terms of how they investigate these murders and that kind of thing. So first of all, one thing I really liked about the series is that it was actually narrated by Gibbs in the present day, or also narrated by Mark Harmon too, which was nice as well. So technically that's kind of his return to NCIS, or the NCIS like universe, sort of, I guess. But it is set, or at least the narrated parts are set in present day, so we kind of actually get a flash forward too at some point in the series, or in the first two episodes. They flash forward to Gibbs kind of sitting by a fire somewhere, and we see that he is writing in a journal these events that we're seeing portrayed on screen, which I think was kind of cool because this is the first time we're seeing Gibbs after his retirement in the regular NCIS series. So it's kind of a follow-up to that in a way, but also a prequel. And I like that they did it that way instead of just making it completely set in the past. Like, we get to see that Gibbs is now writing this sort of memoir type thing for somebody to read someday. But I like that we're getting to see this because Gibbs isn't normally one to talk about his past, and I kind of am interested to see what led him to actually write this journal and write these things that we're seeing, and kind of talk about it and everything. So that's kind of a different look at him as a character and him as a person, because he's finally opening up for whatever reason that he decided to write this memoir type thing. Like, it must mean that there's somebody that he wants to see this, or there's some reason that he's bringing this up in the first place. So I kind of like that we get that sort of mystery almost, and I hope maybe that gets resolved as well. Maybe we find out who Gibbs is writing this for. Is he writing it for his team back home, like McGee and all them? Is he writing this for just other people to read in the future if they ever, like, future NCIS agents or something? Like, if they need a sort of like mentor to follow that would kind of guide them through what it takes to be an NCIS agent, and like Gibbs is like gone by then or whatever, they can read this and study it and like learn something about this Gibbs guy and kind of his rules and everything, and what it takes to be an NCIS agent. I feel like that's the kind of route that maybe this is going, and I like that we got to see that it's connected and tied into the regular NCIS series while also being its own thing, just through the lens of Gibbs telling this story essentially to us, but also to whoever he is trying to tell it to through these notes and through these journal entries and that kind of thing. And I just thought it was kind of nice seeing Mark Harmon as Gibbs again, even though it is brief and it's not going to keep going forward in time every time, but at least having him narrate it I thought was a nice touch. I also like too how we get to see like a different side of Gibbs in this show compared to how he is in the NCIS series, because we know in that series he's this like tough and gritty investigator that's, you know, gives tough love to his team and that sort of thing, tries to teach them a lesson through being like rough with them and everything else, and trying to be all serious and keeps things to himself and all that kind of stuff. And occasionally he opens up to his friends or, you know, people that are close to him. But, you know, because he's a Marine, he was kind of trained to be that sort of like tough guy who has to like be the leader of the team and can't let his team see when he's heartbroken or whatever. Like, he has to keep moving forward. So he never shows that side of himself. And, you know, in this series, in the NCIS series, he's actually experienced and all that kind of stuff. Like, people follow him, people look up to him, he's a mentor. Even though he is kind of introverted more so than anybody else in the series and keeps everything to himself, he is still, they still do look up to him as this leader and this mentor figure that they can follow and learn things from. And we see that throughout the series. And now in this show, we're getting to see the reverse of that, where Gibbs is now the young rookie who's just joining NIS, who doesn't really know anything. We see him kind of like getting sick at a crime scene when he sees the body on the floor. Like, we're not used to seeing that from the Gibbs we know from the present day. So it was kind of a nice, like, sort of flipping the script kind of thing, like seeing that Gibbs wasn't always like that. He had to sort of become that way in order to become the man that he is today. And I guess that's what the show was meant for. You know, it was meant to be this origin story of Gibbs, so you're kind of going to see that. But I didn't exactly know how far back it was actually going to go when I heard about it. I didn't know it was going to be like right at the beginning of his career at NIS, right after we know his wife, Shannon and Kelly, were killed. It's kind of right after that point, so he's still kind of dealing with all that trauma at the same time. So we're getting to see all of that play out in real time, like, and as I said, as Gibbs is narrating this and writing this down. The thing that kind of really kept my attention the most about this series, though, was the fact that it had a different like tone and aesthetic to it compared to the actual NCIS series. Like, if you look at that series, it is branded as a like kind of police drama type thing. So it has those drama moments where there's the comedy and humor side, there's the more serious side to it sometimes where the characters are learning something, but it's mainly about family and sticking together as your team, as your family, treating your team as your family and all that kind of stuff, and being there for each other. And you see that in like every episode. Like, they're always trying to help each other in some way in their personal lives as well as in the investigations and while they're at work together and everything else, and they're all really good friends. That's the kind of show that NCIS is, and that's why I feel like it's been on so long, is because it has that sort of relatable feel to it where it's just fun to sit down and watch it, and it has that the right level of like comedy and humor and mystery and intrigue to it. Whereas this series, NCIS Origins, is just straight up like more gritty and grounded and feels more like True Detective and an actual police procedural. And I kind of liked that change because it gave us this like darker tone to it where everything feels more serious. Everything feels more like against the clock sort of thing. Like, they have only a certain amount of time to solve these cases or whatever. And because of that, it feels like there's more at risk and there's more stakes to it. And I kind of like that they went that route with it because it makes it stand out from all the other NCIS spin-offs we've seen, like NCIS Los Angeles, Hawaii, New Orleans, all of those. Those all had that same kind of tone to the regular series where it has the bit of humor and like the mix of humor and all that. But none of the spin-offs have ever been like this, and this one felt more like you're watching one of those like true crime documentaries or something, like just the way it was shot, and maybe even the lighting was a little bit darker to give it that darker tone. But I don't know, I mean, it just kind of felt different to me. It didn't feel like I was watching an NCIS show. It felt like I was watching just a regular, like, separate detective show thing, which kind of worked in my opinion because it made it seem more interesting and feel more real than the regular series does. So it's kind of different, but in a good way. And I think that people are really going to latch on to that when you compare it to the regular NCIS series and all the other spin-offs. So that was kind of everything I liked about the series. Now, there are a couple things that I didn't really like that I hope they fix in later seasons or something if they decide to have a couple seasons of this series. And one of those things is that Sean Harmon wasn't brought in to play the young Gibbs. I think the only reason that's an issue is because we've seen him play this character before in flashbacks in the regular NCIS series, and I think having him not playing Gibbs here just kind of makes it seem like almost like it's a reboot type thing rather than actually connected to the regular NCIS series. Like, if they were going to have a young Gibbs, they should have just kept Sean Harmon. I don't know if he didn't want to do it, because he is an executive producer on this show along with his dad, Mark Harmon. So, like, it's kind of weird that he's not in this show, and that sort of took me out of it a little bit. It wasn't that big of a deal, I guess, because they had to redo, like, the flashback with when Gibbs leaves Shannon and Kelly there to go off and join the military, and then he comes home and they're dead because they were murdered or whatever. They had to like redo that because they had to have this different actor playing the young Gibbs, the one that's playing him in this series. So when you look back at the regular series and you see that like someone else is playing Gibbs, and then you watch this series later on, it's kind of just continuity wise, it kind of doesn't fit. But I mean, it didn't really affect it that much where it like ruined the whole show. But I don't know why Sean Harmon wasn't playing Gibbs in this, considering we've seen him as the character before. That's just a little nitpicky thing, though. And then one other thing that I didn't really like, this especially I think they need to fix in future seasons. And this isn't just with this show, it's with a lot of other series that are narrated by somebody. Because there's a lot of shows out there that are, like Young Sheldon and that kind of thing. They're narrated by somebody. So there's scenes in this show where there's two characters talking and Gibbs is nowhere, like Gibbs isn't in the room. He's nowhere near them to hear this conversation, and yet the show is showing us that they're talking to each other. They're saying this about Gibbs or whatever, which doesn't make sense when you think about it. If Gibbs is narrating this and thinking back to these moments and everything else, how does he know that that thing happened? How does he know that that conversation took place between these two characters if he wasn't even in the room? You know, like I said, they do this in a lot of those kind of shows, and I think that kind of takes you out of it a little bit because you know it's supposed to be narrated by this character. I mean, like, yeah, I guess they have to make it a show, so they have to show these characters talking to each other, you know, to add to the drama and all that, but I don't think it fits with this being narrated by somebody in the present day, especially if they weren't there in that scene in the first place. So, like, how exactly does Gibbs know that that happened? Unless one of them tells him about that conversation sometime in the future. But even still, he wouldn't know it happened exactly like that, or they wouldn't remember the exact words that they said for that. So it either means that Gibbs is making up some of this stuff, or you know, being like an unreliable narrator, or that it was just done for the show's sake and doesn't actually, and kind of breaks the continuity and doesn't actually fit with the narration part of the show, which kind of just ruins the whole aspect of the show if you think about it. But again, that wasn't anything, you know, that can't really be fixed in the future, I guess. Just kind of have Gibbs there, or have him listening in or something, or have the conversation take place in the area where the whole group meets or something like that. I just feel like they wanted to have those scenes in there and also make it a show narrated by Gibbs at the same time, so they just did both together, and it doesn't really make sense in retrospect when you really think about it compared to every other scene that Gibbs is a part of, because that makes sense. He was there, he remembers it, he experienced it, but to not be present for those conversations, and those conversations to be shown on this show that he's narrating, it just doesn't really fit, and it kind of ruins like that aspect of the show, that it's narrated by someone in the present day. But other than like those two little nitpicks I have, there wasn't too much that I didn't really like about the show, at least these first 2 episodes. I mean, maybe I'll do a follow-up at the end of the first season, and we'll see if there was anything else I didn't enjoy, or if I would change my opinion about the show. But for now, that's everything I had about NCIS Origins. Let me know what you guys thought if you saw those first 2 episodes, if you're a fan of NCIS and all that. Also, what was your favorite Gibbs moment from the regular NCIS series? Let me know all that down in the comments section. Also, be sure to like this video and subscribe for more. I have done some other NCIS related videos in the past. I did a theory a long time ago about how Gibbs gets his boat out of his basement. It was one of our most popular videos on this channel, so go check that one out just for a laugh if you want, or to put your own theory in there, whatever. There's a couple other ones on here as well, so check out all of those. Thank you for watching the video, everyone, and I'll see you in the next one.